Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, The Inked Reader. Today I am combining my books and comics wrap up for the month of December. First of all, I always have like the pressure of putting this up as soon as possible because I think no one cares once the year finishes about what you've read in December, but I hope you do. I hope you're watching this because I have a great comic reading month. But let's start with the books. And you might have seen from the statistics that I didn't manage to read even one book on my TBR. I just read Leftover Things and started Fairy Loot. Books from November, they were massive, so I'm in the middle of those. So I am reading the Sword of Kagan, but I am maybe one quarter in. It will be read in January. I'm also reading Under the Whispering Door. That was also my TBR, but it's gonna happen in January. So I've read only 5 things this month because I redid my bookshelves. You probably have seen a video where I go through, a quick tour of my shelves, but I basically spent the Christmas week doing that, and then I was working at the time and just read 5 things. But that's it. We're gonna go from the least enjoyable read to the most enjoyable read as always, and then I'm gonna put the statistics and do the comic part. So number 5, I will have to put The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This is my second Tremblay book I've attempted now, and this is the story of this gay couple that are on a kind of a break with their child in this cabin in the middle of the woods. The closest neighbor is 2 miles apart, and the child one morning, she's out playing outside doing all stuff when she's approached by a stranger who starts playing with her and tells her whatever's gonna happen next is not your fault. And shortly after, a group of people join this other man, this random man that approached the child, and they're trying to break in the cabin, and they basically say we need to come in and you have to make this very difficult choice in order to save the world, because if you don't do it, the world is gonna end. No. Just no. What was this? Like, what is this book? I'm honestly mad that a book like this is so famous to the point that a TV show or a movie has been done, has been adapted. No, I'm angry with the fact that a book like this could reach such fame. What is this? Like, what? I mean, I wasn't impressed by the first Tremblay I've read. I enjoyed a few scenes, but I do not like his writing, and the same is in here. I don't find his writing particularly skillful. I don't find anything peculiar about his writing, but also the plot is shit. Like, nothing happens that is interesting in this book, and the end, I wasn't even particularly disappointed by the end, because halfway through this book, I knew it was gonna be shit. I almost gave this 1 star. The only reason why I didn't give it 1 star is because 1 star is for books that they do something that I am profoundly disturbed by, or like I am particularly angry with. The only reason this got 2 stars is because objectively I just found these meaningless, not interesting, but I'm angry of having spent time and wasting my time on these, but I can't say that I had any like moral gripe against these, which is reserved for my 1 stars, usually on average. So this is a 2-star book. I don't mind slasher necessarily, sometimes I found them quite interesting, but this was boring. Even to be a sort of slasher, we don't get any answers in the end. That's not even an option. Like, the way this ends is exactly how it is for the whole thing. Pointless. Like, we don't know anything. We don't know anything more than we know at the beginning of this book. So you start the first page of this book that you know things, and you know exactly the same amount of things by the end of this book. And what happens in between is particularly boring, and it's slow, and it's not even like a lengthy book, and it's a pity though, because the premise could be interesting, the premise had potential. It was just completely wasted. So no, I think I'm gonna give up on the author. I don't think he's for me. Not particularly fond of the plots that he puts out, and I don't love his writing. For me, there is not much that I can reach out for in his books. I'm sorry if you love him, but what was this? Like a waste of time. Then I will have to put Catherine Slaughter, Pretty Girls. This is a thriller, and you basically, okay, so the sibling of our 2 main protagonists goes missing when they are little, and they know there is foul play involved, but the girl is never recovered. No one knows what happens to this sister of hers. And then many decades later, another girl goes missing, and a bunch of events happen that puts these two girls, so this, the sisters of the girl that gone missing 20 years prior, 30 years prior, they kind of, they start uncovering the truth about the disappearance of the sister and of this new girl. I'm just gonna leave it at that. This is my first Slaughter book, and I've just found this okay. I wasn't particularly impressed. Yes, it is a very graphic thriller, as I was promised, but it's definitely not a crime novel. I think it's pretty much a thriller. There is no detective or sort of a thing. Like, you kind of know who the bad guy is pretty soon, and then you kind of go on this chase of a bad guy with the protagonist, which is something that necessarily doesn't appeal to me. I'm definitely more into crime novels where you need to find out who done it, and so that element was taken out of the picture immediately. I think the twists that happen in these, I kind of called them. And also, I don't shy away from violent books. If you watch my favorite books ever, and you know that some of my favorite books have a lot of violence in them. I love the horror genre, so you know that I don't shy away from it. I do believe, though, that some of the sentences in these and some of the scenes in these were not interwoven well with the plot, and they were mostly done for shock value. And again, as someone who doesn't have any problem with violence in her books, I do think that some of this is done just to make the story more interesting, because otherwise it wouldn't be that interesting if she didn't just pop in a random sentence about a horrible torture that's been happening that's been kind of perpetrated on this woman or the other woman. It was a bit gratuitous at times. Maybe it was just not, in my opinion, just put well, or integrated well in the story. So I felt that shock value element, which I usually don't get in, violent books. So I wasn't particularly impressed. I might be interested in reading more by her. However, I'm a bit scared because I know that this is one of her most popular books, so if it goes downhill from here, I might not be interested in picking up anything else by the author, but let me know. Didn't mind the writing or anything of the sort, but it was okay. I also think it was a bit far-fetched. Like, when you write a thriller that's just, takes place in the real world, like, it's just a thriller, things would never in a million years go down the way they do in here. And with my thrillers, I struggled to suspend belief a bit more, and so this was so far-fetched and absurd on so many different levels. When I was like, no. So yeah, 3 stars. It wasn't bad. I read it for whether it was, but I'm not impressed. I mentioned that I've read 5 things, but I've read 6 things. I forgot about one, so I'm gonna put these. I'm inserting these in the right place, but I had to film it a bit meshed up anyway. A Curse for True Love. I finished this trilogy by Garber. This is a subsequent trilogy from her Caraval series. And I finished this trilogy. It came out last month, I think. And basically, in the first book of this second trilogy, you follow Evangeline. She makes a deal with Jack. And Jack is a fate. It's kind of like a fairy sort of creature, magic creature, and he cannot kiss anybody because he kills them. So he can only kiss his true love. Everybody else he tries to kiss, he kills. And so he needs Evangeline to kiss 3 people. They make this kind of deal where she gets her betrothed back, who's been enchanted to love another woman, and she will get him back if she gives 3 people kisses when Jack tells her to do it. Sort of a premise like that. It's very fantastical, the story. She has a way of describing things that it's like reading a fable, and I love her for it. I love her writing. I found it so just juicy, a story to go through. The way she described things, I can really visualize them, but I also loved Jack and Evangeline. Now, the 3rd book is the weakest one. I think it feels very rushed, and again, I do believe that there is a bit of a pressure from publisher. I'm just guessing, speculating here, where I think some of the authors feel pressure of putting out books quicker than they should, and if it comes from the pages, it felt a bit rushed. If also read younger than the whole YA series did. So you always felt, you always read a bit on the younger side. But this one particularly, I kind of picked up on it particularly. I did like the end, and I think what happens to Apollo, the character of Apollo, so fitting. So I gave this 4 stars. It wasn't deserved. I think it's probably 3.75 stars. Maybe I gave, yeah, it would probably be around the 3.5 stars. I am sure she will publish more books in this world, and hopefully when she does, because it's the start of a new trilogy, she will have less pressure, or she will be less rushed. So we'll continue on reading everything she puts out, because there is just something very compelling, very quick about her books. You just sit down and you can read them in a few sittings. A Curse of True Love, a bit disappointing, considering how much I loved the rest of the series and these 2 characters. Jack is also mostly not present in this book, and for, you know, a book that revolves around Evangeline and Jack not being present is a bit of an issue. Next place, so I gave these 5 stars. On a quality side, because this is a non-fiction, the amount of research that went into this, it is the best thing quality-wise for the genre of non-fiction that I've read probably in a long time. And this is Cancer, the Emperor of All Maladies, basically a history of cancer. The author does a remarkable job in researching and telling us about the history of cancer and the amount of scientific research, how the discoveries that have been done thus far came about, and a lot of the losses and wins, smaller wins that we have against cancer. I listened to this on audio. It was a very lengthy audiobook that it was really compelling though to listen to. However, for someone who does have health anxiety like I do, this was a chore to go through, and it was very hard for me just to listen through this. So I'm glad that now I put a lot of distance between me and the book, and I'm feeling much better by, you know, having this distance. Said that it was brilliant. Like, from the prose, the amount of details in the research and the, you know, the amount of solid sound research this author put in this book, it just really deserves a prize. And I think it's so fascinating learning about the history of this illness, and it's also very fascinating the theories that scientists have nowadays about how cancer is evolving, what it means for us. It is overall sad though to see that despite this was published in 2010, and despite that, I think the mortality rate now has improved compared to 2010, we are still so much more to go, and we are not even near conquering this horrible illness. It's worth a read, definitely, but it's also terrifying. just so you know, especially if you have anxiety, this is terrifying. It's indeed the Emperor of All Maladies. Number two and 1 were pretty much the same. I gave them both 4 stars. I enjoyed pretty much them the same. The only reason why this is number 2 is because I put this book down for a couple of weeks while the other one I kept reading. So at number 2 we'll have to put The Hod King by Josiah Bancroft. This is the second to last book in a quartet, and it's the Tower of Babel series. Yeah, the Books of Babel series. And this is an epic high fantasy, and in the first book you follow this newly married couple that travel to the Tower of Babel, this kind of tourist attraction where usually you stay outside, you go through a market, you know, you kind of visit a bit the tower from outside, and you know that inside there are like entire ecosystems. So each kind of level of these towers have its own populations, costumes, and you can go inside the tower, but usually you never get out. Now, when they are there just exploring on their honeymoon, the outside of the tower, his bride goes missing, and so for a series of events he has to go inside the tower to look for her. Josiah Bancroft's prose and writing, it is one of the most remarkable writing I've met in the genre in the last bunch of years. As you can see, I've tabbed the hell out of this book. For me, that I don't put many tabs on books at all, this is outstanding. I really love his writing, and I think the way I'm just so in love with his writing that he carries me through a book that is slow. And I think this must be said, that I did appreciate the plot at the end when it all comes together. I really appreciate what he did, but Senlin is mostly missing from this book. So you get Senlin in the first quarter, if even that, and then you go through other characters' point of view for the rest of the book. Violeta, I know how you pronounce it. Her point of view is when I put the book down, because I found it a bit dragging. I was particularly not interested until the very end. And then you go through, what is the name of the lady? I don't remember. I don't know, I'm horrible with names. Edith. Edith's point of view I kind of appreciate a bit more. Then, you know, you go back to Stanley at the very end. So I felt Stanley's absence a lot. I want to read about him. I found him the most fascinating characters of them all, so his been missing wasn't a strong point of his plot. And the way it all comes together is brilliant. It's so well crafted. It took me a while to appreciate it while I was going through it, and I wouldn't go through it if it was for his outstanding writing. I am scared of reading the final thing, but I think this is, you know, the first kind of quartet by the author, and I do generally believe that I will keep reading this author and I can see the potential of growth. But it's a very well crafted plot. It's just a bit of a more slow paced, at some point of this book at least, slow paced high fantasy, which I don't necessarily mind, but it takes a bit more time for me to appreciate and kind of, you know, sit back and look at the scope and look what he's doing with the plot and appreciate the craft. It just takes me a bit longer to get there when the book feels a bit slow while you go through it. And at number 1, I put Where the Crawdads Sing. This is a historical fiction, sort of. It reads very much like a literature fiction, but you follow this girl who is born and raised kind of by herself in the marshes. She's coming from this very poor family that lives in the marshes, and then her mother leaves, all her siblings leaves, and she's left with her drunk dad to kind of fend for herself. When you actually start the story, so you kind of have a few chapters in the present, and then you kind of go back and, you know, follow her story, her childhood, her young, you know, when she's a young adult, up to a point where, you know, in the present, someone has died. So a very popular boy of the town has died, you know, from the beginning, and he has died in the marshes. So now people are wondering how he died, because there are no clues or anything, and so no one knows how he dies, but they know that she lives in the marshes, so she's a potential suspect. And so then you go back and you look at the suspect and look how she grew up and how things turn out to be up to the point, you know, of this boy dying. And this was a very fascinating read. I think when I read something that is taking place in a place that I've never heard of before, and the way her writing was, again, very nice. So she really described the marshes and the kind of flora and fauna of the marshes in a way that made me really picture in my mind. So I immersed myself in this world, and the fascination of this book came also from kind of discovering, and I like to immerse myself in my books when I read them. So I was there and I was exploring this new world. I was also a big fan of Kyla. I think her solitude spoke to mine in a special way, so we connected. I did see the end coming. I think it was pretty obvious at one point. The way she's done it, it's too later and too out of the blue for people not to put pieces together. And I've seen this done over and over again, where an author is creating a mystery, in my opinion, in the wrong way. It's not interwoven in the story as it should be. It's sudden, it's abrupt, it's just a few chapters before the actual revelation, so you really easily connect the dots. So that I really enjoyed, though, the reason why things happen the way they do, and so I was okay with the ending. In Inside, though, the character of Chase is done poorly. I think his behavior changes abruptly, and I do get the similarities that she wanted to put between, you know, Chase and Kyla's situation and Kyla's parents' situation. So I kind of looked back and just saw, she wanted to make something similar, kind of a comparison. So I get the why, but I think she should have done it more slowly. It would have been more believable, because the way Chase changes abruptly, not saying that it doesn't happen in real life, it can, but in my fictional book I like things to be built a bit more, and so I think she used the character of Chase as a plot device more. It didn't feel real, it didn't feel like an actual character, which is a pity, because I think there was even potential, you know, for this to be even better in my opinion. But overall, I was very glad I read this. It's a book I will keep, and I will watch a movie. I was still glad I got through it. So yeah, these are my reads for my book reads. Let's move on. Hopefully you got the timestamps down below so it can also help you navigate this video if you're not interested in the books or the comics. I'm gonna try and be brief because I've read a lot of things. Only Spy Family I couldn't get around to read this month. I plan to read it today, which is the last day of 2023, and I didn't get around to it. So you're gonna see this video in January, but I'm filming on the last day of the year. So without further ado, let's go into the comics I've read from the least enjoyable read to the most enjoyable read. 2226. This is probably my least liked Fujimoto manga I've ever read thus far. I have this is a collection of short stories that has nothing to do with any of his other series, so it's just random stories. And let's say, okay, the first one, so Mermaid Rhapsody, I really enjoyed this one. It's a like, he wanted to write a normal story for how much he can, and I really enjoyed the story overall. And the story that I also found quite okay was the one about the demon girl. So this one, which called Nayuta with Prophecy. I just found it okay, nothing peculiar or particular. What I really enjoyed of this collection is the story Sisters. I found the ending of that story of Sisters particularly clever and well done. Said that the story I Woke Up as a Girl was a total disaster, wasn't it? It just was. Let's set aside all the rest. Let me just say it was just too rapey and sexual abruptly. Like, I understand it's a short story, so yeah, to focus whenever you wanted to focus on that side. I think I just didn't like the focus on the sexual rapey part of things, and I found it particularly odd and disastrous as a story. So yeah, the sister story put the 0.5 in this collection, but overall a bit disappointing, I'll be really honest. I preferred the other collection of short stories for sure. Okay, and number 10 I will put another Fujimoto, which is Fire Punch. I usually enjoy my manga and comics when I read them, graphic novels, so take it with a pinch of salt in the sense of the rating. I had an amazing reading month as always. But yeah, number 10, Fire Punch, volume 8. I finished this series. I give synopsis in my TBR. I mean, at least I did in 2023. Things are gonna change in 2024. I'm not gonna go through synopsis of these volumes, just to keep this short and sweet. This is for a horror, dark dystopian fantasy by the author. It's 8 volumes long. I finished it, and this was exactly as weird as its beginnings. Overall, I did enjoy the last volume in the series. I think it was well fitting the rest of the story, and I am pleased on the way it ended. I was a bit hesitant at times, I was a bit scared at times, but I think overall I am glad I checked this series out. I don't regret having read it at all. And I think overall, if I look back at the themes of these, for me personally, it came out the discussion around the dangers of idolizing someone and making a normal human into a god, and the repercussion of that. And I do believe that Avoid it in his peculiar, unique way, which is what I love Fujimoto's manga. He also portrayed war and the consequences of war in a very realistic way, considering, that he had only 8 volumes, that the discussion about idolizing someone and making someone into a god when they are not is such a big discussion, that he did a well done job. He communicated his points, or what I interpreted as his points, very well in a short series. And number 9, I'm gonna put Rick and Morty. I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely adored these. The only reason is that all the rest are pretty much series, or they carry more weight overall. But don't get this wrong, like, I love Rick and Morty. These are just issues of kind of like watching an episode of Rick and Morty, and the art is exactly the same. I'm just gonna say this about this volume. There is a story that has as a protagonist, or as one of the main protagonists, Buster Gibbons, which is a clone of Justin Bieber. And he speaks only in lyrics, in songs lyrics from Bieber's songs. He's clearly Bieber, but because I don't know, they couldn't put his name down, they called him Buster Gibbons. And I had some very good laughs. I found the idea genius what they do with Buster Gibbons. I need to call one of my plants that. It's not an artist I've ever followed. I was already old when he kind of became such a popular pop star among teens. But of course I know who he is, and I found the plot of this so hilarious. Like, I was just, Rick and Morty's genius. And also the story about, what was it called? internet cables. This one, wait, I'm gonna find the title. The interdimensional cable one. It's called Interdimensional Cable 3, the threequel, where basically there are like parodies of popular TV shows or programs or even anime that we are familiar with, especially if you're born in the 90s, so the early 2000s where you're watching this stuff, and I just had the best laughs. This always puts me in a good mood. I always smile and laugh, and it's Rick and Morty. Then I will have to put Hell's Paradise Volume 5. Is another series I really been enjoying and having just a very good time with it. I don't want to spoil anything. Maybe I can just show you this very quickly. In this volume we follow characters though that are, although I enjoy all of them, this set of characters are the one I care about the least as of now. So the fact that the main focus is on them, it was okay, but I wasn't as intrigued as I used to be in other volumes. However, what they achieve in this is remarkable, and I'm curious of, you know, the repercussion and the ramifications from there. I'm also fascinated by the end. Gabimaru is mostly absent from this volume. Again, this is something that worked against this because I love the guy and I want to know more about him. So what we know about him in the very end, the last issue, I'm fascinated, I want to know more, and I'm here for the next volume. Then I will have to put Monstrous. Now, Monstrous is a series I absolutely loved this year, and this volume is particularly low compared. There was a bit of a gap since summer, since the last volume came out, and I think the thing with this volume of Monstrous, which is a steampunk grimdark horror story, one of the most complex and best drawn series, graphic novel series I've read in recent years, and I love Monstrous. In this one we kind of go, without giving any spoilers, we kind of go in a place, it's a new place, and we learn a lot about the lore of certain creatures that was both super confusing. This is also part of the fascination with Monstrous. It's a dark, complex world that will make you think. You have to stop and think, you have to connect dots. It's not an easy series to go through, and it's a series that if you have not started, please wait for it to be finished before you binge read it, because I think you will get more out of it rather than having to wait all the time for a volume to come out. But in this case, it played against my appreciation of the volume. I still enjoyed throughout, I still loved it, but not as much as other volumes, because finally I felt like I had grasped things and now I was thrown off again. I thought I finally grasped part of the history of this world, and now more history is added to it and I got a bit confused. So some parts I had to read twice in order to try and grasp what's happening. I think because of the combat scenes, the art, which is always stellar, was a bit more confusing than usual, and Micah in this, her stubbornness kind of rubbed me the wrong way, which usually Micah is one of my favorite anti-heroes ever, especially in comics. But in this one, she just got on my nerves a bit. I don't know why. I'm very excited about what's next, what happens at the end. I'm just fearful for how long we will have to wait for the next volume. Then I will put One Piece, volume 10. I have continued on past volume 9, the very famous volume 9, and I have to say that I'm very pleased on how things continued on, which is such a big thing happening in volume 9, so such a crescendo, and how he continued on, it was very entertaining as always. And I must say that in this volume I particularly loved how Luffy manages not to drown. I found the clever idea they found on saving him from that situation was very brilliant. Okay, then I will have to put Vinland Saga. So I've read book 7, and which contains 2 volumes, and I finished the slave arc with these, and at the very end the new arc starts. I will do a review with spoilers in it, and I think I need a few more days to just think back about the slave arc and jot down all the thoughts I have about it. I'm still weirded out a bit from how things have turned out to be. There is a huge part of the plot here that's conflict resolution based, focused, and initially my instinct would have been, Thorfinn, go Berserk. Please go Berserk. I tend to enjoy more grimdark things that are more filled with violence, or like the horror genre. That's why I love series like Berserk, where it's just mayhem and fighting and just, you know, this hero fighting everything, even air. So this thing, whatever happens in here, it's different. And initially when something happens in here, I was just like, Thorfinn, beat them up. But then the resolution that happens instead in here, it was odd, but not odd in a bad way. I think odd actually in a very surprising, refreshing way. It's just not, I need to step out of my comfort zone to accept and appreciate what's been done. And I think I am able to do it, but I just need more time to reflect back and think back on how things have gone in order to fully appreciate the scope of it. It also gives me hope though that this is a series where I will never know where it's going, and it will keep having the element of surprise where I'm expecting something and then it turns out to be different, which is something that I actually truly appreciate. It's refreshing. I don't know if it will always work for me. As of now, it's been working, and so yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts I think on the arc, on the slave arc, and I want to do a proper job when I do a spoilery review of it. But I'm excited for the next arc. Then I will have to put Day Dark. I read volume 2 of Day Dark, and let me say that this woman, Hayashida, the mangaka, I am in awe. Despite these kind of really having a plot just in the last issue. For the first 5 issues, there's not much happening apart from us following around the main protagonist, trying to kind of put furniture in a new ship. I believe it's a new ship that they have. And let me just say that there is at one point part of the plot, if you want to call it that, where they go to this intergalactic shopping center where basically you can find any sort of thing. It's handled, the staff on it are zombies. This kind of shopping mall, you know, our protagonist at one point just like goes, well, but how come people don't just come in and rob it? Because, you know, there's no staff, there are no defense. But this shopping mall is done in a way that if you steal something, or if pirates try to kind of invade it, or like kind of trying, you know, to steal stuff, it will self-destruct and kill everybody. So basically, these shopping malls are, no one goes there to rob them, because otherwise they would just explode with the shopping mall. And I just found the way she comes up with these ideas just absolutely hilarious. To the point that, again, I just would probably read 20, 30, 50 volumes of these people in space, not doing much apart going about their weird lives. So this is how good this is. The plot toward the end, I am intrigued. I want to know where that it's going. It's just so out there. Love Day Dark. Thus far, just 2 volumes in, I'm obsessed. Then I will have to put Berserk, the 14th volume, special edition volume, which contains volume 40 and 41. So after these, Miura's passed, and so he didn't write anything else past this. So this is the conclusion of the fantasy arc that I know of. And at the back of this volume, there is just a very informative, extremely well done kind of booklet called, they call him here, let me see, Berserk Official Guidebook, which I really appreciated and read, and I loved it, and it's gonna come very much in handy when I do like my spoilery reviews and stuff like that, if I want to refresh my mind on something. Now let me say this is lower than I thought it would be, and upon reflection I didn't love the fantasy arc as much as I loved any of the other arcs in the series. I think the fantasy arc will have to take the cake for my least favorite arc. And it's sad, but it is how it is. And I think part of the reason is because this didn't feel like a proper conclusion. It's not concluded very clearly, and I think some people said, oh, you know, it's kind of concluded, it's satisfactory. Not in my opinion, I'm sorry, I don't think it's satisfactory. I think the progress we make in Fantasia arc that are promised, at the end they are very just partially there. And I think when it comes down to Casca and Guts, I wanted to give in a spoilers here because I will do a spoilery field review, but just to say the situation between Casca and Guts is exactly as it was from the start of the Conviction arc. We are still there. And you might say, no, but well, whatever. I get it. I respectfully disagree. I think we are still pretty much where we were at the beginning, despite everything that happens in the fantasy arc. What I did love about these is the very end, the Moonchild bit, and what we find out about the Moonchild. Now they've got a clear idea of who and what happened there. Found that particularly genius. The last panel, the last couple of panels in these, tailored around the Moonchild, loved it, and made me think a lot, all the repercussion and putting things together. I will be eternally grateful to Miura and Berserk, and it's still my favorite manga series ever, will always be. I feel very bittersweet knowing that this is not concluded, not nearly concluded. Potentially the world's even more expanding now, and we will never know. Like, I know he probably left information, so what he meant to do and something like that, but he will never tell us, and that is heartbreaking for me. So I finished these, felt a bit incomplete, and I felt so bitter about life and the unfairness of life in this case. Fitting maybe for the story that Berserk is, you know, this grimdark with very little hope story. I just said about the mangaka. Anyway, I love the art. I think it gets better and better and better. It is truly the most stunning thing I've ever seen in terms of art and story and everything about Berserk. I did see also little of Guts compared to other characters, and I've been missing Guts taking the front stage of things for a while now. So that it's another kind of critique if you want. Griffith, let me say this about Griffith. I think in this arc specifically, I put a lot of distance between me and him, and I think he really take a back seat in all of these. And I know that he's conspiring in the background. I know that whatever is happening there, because we do follow him, but it doesn't feel as relevant, and I know it's an illusion. I know that in theory, what's happening in the background with him, it will have a lot of relevance eventually. I feel very distant with him, and I felt like the scope was all around Casca and finally getting somewhere, and when we do, we really don't, because I can't spoil. I'll tell you in the spoilery one. So the main focus, the end of the main focus, which was Casca and her story, then it finishes in a way that feels like, but it's like we kind of didn't make much progresses. Enough said. I'll keep all the rest for the spoilery review that I'm gonna do at some point in January or February. And yeah, I think I still need to process that I actually finished Berserk. Okay, so number 2 and 3, I was debating a lot which one to put first. So I will go with these. I didn't have anything to complain about, while I found that Berserk, a few things overall I was slightly disappointed with. But I love Berserk with all my being, so it was difficult for me to put a third place. It can go second, first place just because of attachment I have with it, but I also want to be objective when I review a couple of volumes, as I did in that case, and I did have some gripes with it. I did have some things that I didn't click with in terms of plot wise, and with the second one that I chose to put in second place, I didn't have anything, so that's why it's here. Also, is one of my other beloved, Doradoro, volume 10. I take this occasion to say I don't speak enough for how much I love the character of Ebisu. I adore her. I found her so quirky, so odd and sweet and naive in this cutthroat world where everybody's absolutely out of their mind. It's like full of odd things happening, but her, she manages to be odd among the odd ones, if it makes sense. So I love her character, and you will know then how I feel about what happens in this volume. And I don't know what happened next, and I want to continue on and read a bunch of Doradoro now because I need to know. The plot is getting more interesting. I feel like finally we're getting somewhere. I'm getting some answers, but some more questions on top of them. So yeah, I need to know. I need to know after reading this volume. 5 stars. And a number 1. Now, I chose this number 1 because you have to know something about me. I love vampires, okay? I love vampires. And when I was a teen, like early 20s, I was obsessed with vampires. And I'm not talking about Twilight. I did enjoy Twilight. I really liked Twilight. I don't want to put shit on the book that a lot of people bash, but the reality is the reason why probably they are reading nowadays is also thanks to Twilight. So I really, really love Twilight. But it's not where my obsessions for vampire came from. My obsession started way earlier. It started with Dracula. And then it moved on to Interview with the Vampire and the Anne Rice series, and then it solidified with Anita Blake series. And Anita Blake is an urban fantasy series where you follow this woman. She is a US Marshal. She's also a necromancer, so she revives the dead for a living, but she also works for the kind of government. And in this world where vampires have come out and have said, you know, we are here, we are real. So we have regulations, rules we have to follow in order to live among humans, and if some of them do not follow those rules, the government will hire Anita Blake to go and kill the bad guys. So she is a mercenary for the government, sort of. She's actually licensed to kill vampires that misbehave. And the first 8 to 10 books of Anita Blake series, I was obsessed with. I didn't have a social life, clearly, as an older teen. And I had Anita Blake. So this one is an adaptation of a first novel, which is Guilty Pleasure. I've read that thing probably around 12 years ago. And I went on a roller coaster. I think I've read the whole Anita Blake series, the first 14 volumes, before it goes very down here, in a year or something. And they're massive books. Listen, Anita Blake is one of my favorite heroines in any book ever. She is tiny, sassy, kick-ass, human, flawed, very self-centered, but with a mouth on herself, and I loved her. I respected Anita Blake a lot, and I really cared about what happened to her. Perfect, flawed main character with a lot of love interests in it. I don't want to spoil anything. It goes into very much erotica fiction after book number 10, which is unfortunate because it does lose a lot of its kick-ass elements and a lot of, you know, the crime part, which was prevalent in the first books. But reading these, having these in a graphic novel format, because this was never adapted in anything, and I would love to. Like the guys that did the originals, the director of originals, the TV show, please do Anita Blake, please. And I love the art. It was very faithful to the first book. So it was a very faithful, it's been years and years and years since I read the first one. But now it made me obsessed again. And I'm so sad that Marvel adapted only the first 3 novels into graphic novel format, so I will read those. Anita Blake sparked my love for urban fantasy. It's the reason why to these days I consider urban fantasy a very strong genre when it comes down to my preferences. It provided me with so many emotions. And book number 8, from 7, book number 7, 8, 9 and 10, they have spicy times in it, and they are the right amount. Then it goes downhill, unfortunately. The element of, you know, finding out who done it, it never was the strongest part of the novels, okay? Not the best crime on that side of things. But it's just the tension between all these characters and sexual tension and, you know, these creatures that are shown to us and their personalities and the whole amount of creatures and the lore that comes with them. It does have an innuendo of sexuality. It's very sexual as a novel, even when there is no sex scenes for the first 7 books. Not direct sex scenes I can remember of. So it's very slow burn romance as well. But there is that kind of innuendo, so you know. And in here, it was very well translated, I believe. Sorry, I'm just reviewing the Anita Blake series now, am I not? Anyway, that's to say, this brought me back to a moment of my life where Anita Blake was my life. And so that's why it's number 1. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know how you finish your year, what you read recently, any plans you have for 2024, any priority series you want to check out. And stay tuned, I will do a spoilery review for the Slave arc from Vinland Saga and from the Fantasia arc in Berserk, in case you're interested in a bit of more lengthy and spoilery conversation. But thank you so much for watching. If you're new, I would love for you to subscribe. and join the community. And I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself. Ciao!